So in addition to all the tweaks and changes that happened over the years, a big piece of legislation for Gibraltar was the Bullying at Work Act. It's quite a short act, but very broad in its nature and the way it's drafted, and we've had very limited amount of cases that have gone to the tribunal. So we're still, I would say, finding our feet a little bit with it, but we see it time and time again coming into play with grievances at work. Commonplace now. We also see it quite commonly being added on when there are claims in the tribunal. So there may be an unfair dismissal claim, but bullying also comes into play as an additional claim. So that's been a key piece of legislation. There have also been changes, for instance, to parental leave. Yes, it's an unpaid leave, but the entitlement to it has been increased quite dramatically.
So for HR reps or people who are in the employment industry, what would you say are some of the big challenges, especially when there are so many constant changes and so many updates and so much to do it by way of continuous professional development? For example, in the area of dismissals and disciplinaries, which is, I believe, something that you've been talking about quite significantly today.
Yes, so we took the opportunity today to also carry out a seminar on handling the disciplinary procedure, because it's something we see time and time again. You know, everybody has to go through a disciplinary at some stage, and there are lots of pitfalls in terms of the process. So we wanted to highlight some of those pitfalls today and look at how, you know, how is a good way to carry out a disciplinary to limit risk, really.
So the main question I think we get is probably how do they go about the process? And the main question or answer we can give them is look at your process. What does it say? Are you handling it as closely as possible to what's there? One question that might arise is, should we suspend somebody who's being investigated for any misconduct, for example? And in that case, I think it's important to look at what the contract says, look at whether it says you can suspend at all, look at whether it says you need to suspend with pay or not, and then decide whether it's generally reasonable or not to suspend the person, because it may be that there's no reason to do it. In other situations, it may be reasonable to do it because they might interfere with witnesses as part of the investigation, or it could be that they are harassing or bullying somebody else to a detriment of another employee, affecting productivity of that person, for example. So I think suspension is quite an important one to think about before you even go down the route of the process.
And when it comes to issues of suspension and dismissal and disciplinaries, of course there are always so many emotional aspects to deal with, as well as all the official ones. Is that a major difficulty that sometimes employers and employees encounter?
We have had scenarios before where, example, the employee says that the person who's conducting the process may not be impartial or may be biased towards, because, for example, they may be close with the person accusing them. So that is something that can complicate matters, and especially in situations where the employer is a small company and they haven't got many people that can deal with the process, it can be difficult to find an impartial person outside of the process. So in those situations, we might advise, for example, that they hire a HR consultant who can be completely impartial. But it can be difficult because, obviously, as you say, emotions can run high, and the person can feel very attacked, even if they're just being investigated and suspended and at that point not really being disciplined.